Okay, so let's set the scene. We've done a lot of talking today, and we're going to finish with even more talking on the whole theme of are technologists getting overexcited? And if they are they right to be overexcited, or is it different this time? So we're going to talk about all kinds of things on this panel, but pretty much all the way through, the question on my mind is, okay, this technology, Bitcoin, whatever it is cool, but is it incremental, or is this actually transformative? Is something really actually quite incredible going on at the moment, or is it just doing what technology often does? Is it getting just gradually better and better? So something like, that there was the pre-World Wide Web world, and then 1989 and Tim Berners-Lee came along, and then there was post-World Wide Web. And that, to me, that seemed to be, quite a shift. That was quite transformative. Whereas, just because your iPhone has a slightly better camera next year, that's kind of more incremental to me. So I'm just trying to sort out what's incremental, what's transformative, and therefore what is making technologists, rightly or wrongly, get a bit overexcited. So that's setting the theme. And I know I've been picking on you a lot this afternoon, but I want more questions from you as well. So quite swiftly, I'm going to get you on the microphone with your questions to these panelists, who I shall now introduce, starting with Dr. Mike Short. I'm delighted to say he joins us from Telefonica Europe, where he's Vice President. He's also served as the President of the Institution of Engineering and Technology. And Mike, I heard a lovely quote from you saying, very simply, I believe in a world of an internet for all, where everybody has access to the internet wherever they need it, wherever they want it. And I think in saying that, to put it in context, you're acknowledging there are still many people who don't have connectivity. So just give us your thoughts on that, just briefly.
Yeah, the theme was very much internet for all, not just based on coverage, and clearly we can do some more in terms of investment, coverage and capacity and speed, but it's also about how do you connect all the things we know on this planet to the internet. So thinking about internet for all as in an inclusive approach to people and things. I've been to countries in the world where their first access to the internet is through mobile. We have a big business in Brazil where probably 80 million of our 100 million customers connect to the internet through mobile today. That would not have been the case 10 years ago. So I think we need to be working much more on internet for all the way I've defined it. And I would include things like accessibility and inclusion in the mix, because I think it's for old people, young people, those who may be disabled in some ways as well, because the internet is a great delivery vehicle for so many new services.
Yeah, okay, but only if people can get access to them. Yeah, brilliant point. And just so we know that who Telefonica is, you trade as O2 in this country.
In the UK, yes, we have 24 million customers here in the UK. I hope you're all on O2.
Oh, everyone is, yeah. We only invited O2 people.
As Telefonica, we have 325 million customers in 24 countries.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so our next panelist is Wendy Tan White. She is, as of quite recently, board member at Tech City UK, and particularly interested in early stage investing and getting behind young startups. And also, many people in this room will know you as the CEO of Moonfruit. So this is a company that I think you co-founded in the year 2000, it says here.
I did, yes, just before the dot-com crash, actually.
Well, that's what I was going to say about you, because you have seen off at least one dot-com crash, haven't you?
I think we saw off that and the financial crisis. In fact, we were pretty counter-cyclical overall.
Okay.
And I think the whole idea of investment, you talk about all the great new future technology we've been talking about today, fantastic, but at the end of the day, they need investment from early stage right through to corporate scaling to actually have a true impact globally. And that takes time. So even this bandied word of unicorns that's been talked about, £1 billion valued companies, most of them take 8 to 10 years to get to that state in reality. So I think the thing about time in this is, my dad was an electrical engineer. He was doing punch cards 40 years ago, and here today we're on mobile. So when you look at it in 40 years, it seems like a very short time for a technology to have accelerated. But then when I look at it from an investment and really growing a company point of view, I'm thinking, 8 to 10 years minimum, right? So I think it depends on if you're zooming in or out.
Okay. And Moonfruit is the platform that allows people to make their own website, isn't it?
Yeah, we had 7 million businesses built on our platform globally. I built the business over 14 years with my co-founders. In fact, one was also another Imperial alumni from here. And the other was my actually husband-to-be, who's at Cambridge. We've now exited from Moonfruit after selling our business to Yale Group, which has got 1.25 SMEs that want to go digital. And now we're early stage investing. So I'm really interested in the new technology. In fact, there's a lot of great stuff coming out of Imperial now that's combined more with focus on commerce, partnerships with the RCA, looking at design as well, the School of Design Engineering. And obviously Tech City is very much looking at the whole ecosystem, from early stage startup right through to corporate and funding.
Yeah, and just whilst we're chatting, I know that one of your passionate interests is women in science and technology, and I'm going to put a tweet to you actually, because we've had a whole load of Twitter traffic about today. This is Anna Williams, who says, I used the term guys in a previous tweet, and it was very much appropriate considering how few women are at this event compared to men. So still a way to go, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I mean, when I joined Imperial did computer science, 14% of the intake were women. And today, talking to Susan Eisenbach, who's now head of DOC, it's still 14%. She's saying it's actually in a way harder. And I think there are multiple reasons. One is STEM itself. There are less girls doing maths. I was actually on a panel at the UK Business Angels Summit yesterday having the same conversation, and I think the factors that came out of there were, the strongest thing is probably the narrative that's going on right now. It's not just about science. Funny enough, the polemic conversation about women in tech is almost putting young women off to some extent. Because when I started, nobody said to me, oh God, are you going to get bullied by some gamer going, I didn't even think about it, to be honest. So I think changing that narrative conversation is important to make it a more attractive industry for them. And today technology is going to affect every industry. It is going to disrupt every vertical and every sector. And it's actually important that everybody is part of that conversation, men and women. So I'm very keen that continues to happen.
Yeah, well, especially when like 50% of the users of all technology are women, it seems a bit crazy if the only people building the technology are men. Anyway, a fascinating subject. Let's say hello to Sam Dickinson. He's lead inventor at Google. Some of you have met him already. He very kind of came along first thing this morning. Good to go. He's been pumping lots of energy into the event ever since. He's a social scientist, and I'm really pleased to say that because I work in a centre for co-curricular studies here at Imperial, and we're the humanities people. This little corner of humanities in a science, technology, and management and medicine university. And also, Sam, I think I'm right in saying that you took part in the CEO Sleep Out scheme.
I did. Yeah.
What a thing to do that was. Just tell us what that scheme was and what it involved, because I think a lot of people in this room probably wouldn't have been quite as brave as you. So what did you do?
Yes, the CEO Sleep Out was an event organised for Hope and Homes for Children, and the idea was to bring together senior leaders from businesses all through the UK and sleep the night in Wembley Stadium on the side on the AstroTurf. It was the most unusual networking event I've ever been part of, but a great way to earn money for a very good cause.
Okay, there you go. And also at Google, you're behind this big innovation and creativity program called the Magic Academy.
Yes.
And thousands of people have gone through the Magic Academy. Again, just in a few words, because we need to get to Mike, who's hanging on Skype, and we need to get to him as well. So just before we hear from Mike, tell us what about the Magic Academy, what that's
Sure,
about.
yeah. My background is in brand, product and service innovation. I used to be lead inventor at a business called What If, which is the world's largest innovation company. And what that business did was run innovation projects with large organizations where people had challenges where they were just struggling sometimes to think a bit differently about them. So we ran projects for many years and codified what we learnt from those experiences. And from then, Google got in touch with me, and I developed the program for them. And it went pretty well because they hired me. And now I run the program globally, but also run innovation projects right across the business, from the commercial side through to dabblings in the Google X projects.
Lovely, okay. In fact, if you hadn't got there first, I think we should have renamed Imperial College the Magic Academy. Imagine that. No, okay. The branding people are now having a fit that I even suggested that. Okay, right, yeah. Sure. Okay, well, let's speak to Mike Hearn, because there is, you think, well, where's Mike? He's actually joining us on the line. Here he is. He's joining us over Skype. He's lead developer at Bitcoin. But actually, Mike, you previously did work at Google. I think during that kind of famous 20% time that Google employees are given, you devoted that time to looking into cryptocurrencies. So take us back to that time.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, loud and clear.
That's great. Okay, so firstly, I'm not actually lead developer of Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have any lead developers. It's like the web in the sense that it's public infrastructure in that regard. But yes, I worked at Google from 2006 until the beginning of last year when I left to focus on Bitcoin full-time. And I worked on Bitcoin, in a mix of spare time and 20% time since around 2010.
And why did you leave? I mean, it must have been quite a high-paid, nice gig at Google, and then you left with this crazy idea of some, kind of decentralized currency. You clearly really believed in it. You put your money where your mouth was. So why did you make that transition?
Yes, it was a nice gig. Yes. Well, I've been involved and interested in Bitcoin since it was tiny and no one had ever heard of it. And when I first got involved, Bitcoin was worth, well, actually the first time I used it, it was worth nothing at all, and there was nothing being bought or sold for it. And then when I got involved again in 2010, it was worth a few cents. And over the years, I've seen it go from nothing, really, just a few people on the internet playing around, to being in the news and being used and having a little economy. And it really fascinated me that that could happen. And so much had happened in the Bitcoin space. It was almost much more interesting than my day job. And so in the end, as it grew, I had more and more responsibilities and more people using my code. So in the end, I decided to, if I was going to be involved in this, I might as well make it my full-time job and not be torn between two different jobs.
Okay, and here you are, and it's a story that I was reading about in Nathaniel Popper's book, Digital Gold.
I've read that book too, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So Mike features quite a lot in that book. So if anybody who reads that book, you'll know that Mike really is, he's been one of the really key guys and continues to be in the whole Bitcoin movement. And Mike, the discussion today is, are technologists getting overexcited? So are we getting overexcited about Bitcoin?
Maybe. Yes.
Really?
Let me say, well, let me divide
it's obviously yes or no, isn't it? So explore both sides.
Okay, so about Bitcoin, I think people are not getting overexcited. I think that's a very exciting topic. But what I do see is a lot of people trying to separate it out into Bitcoin, the currency, and the blockchain as an algorithm. And then they say, well, I don't care about the Bitcoin currency, but the underlying technology will cure cancer and be amazing, and it'll be applied for everything, and it'll change the structure of the economy and so on. And I think that is getting overexcited. The Bitcoin technology was designed to solve a very, very specific problem, which is the Bitcoin currency. And I think it can be reused in some cases, but not as many as some technologists are saying.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you in a way split the discourse between Bitcoin itself and the blockchain technology that we've heard a lot of today, Mike, just to give you background. And
okay.
I think there has been quite I wouldn't say overexcitement, but there has been excitement over blockchain technology and its applications in loads of different areas in business and innovation and product delivery, those kinds of things. So if we were to take a more conservative view, should we think about this as a fragile technology? I have read quotes from you where you do say we have to remember this stuff is still fragile. There's a way to go.
Yeah, it's very experimental, and myself and Gavin Andreessen, who is another long-term Bitcoin developer, we never cease to remind people of that, because there are so many things that can go wrong. And the reason that the blockchain is a very difficult technology is because it's intended for building systems where anyone can do anything to it, right? There's no contracts you have to sign. You don't have to get your identity verified. You don't have to sign a deal with anyone. You just use it. And this throws up all kinds of difficult problems. People can attack the system in various ways. So, and I think sometimes people talk about, they say, I want a blockchain, but I want to control who uses it. In which case, maybe actually you could do better with a slightly different system that doesn't have some of those other problems.
Okay, yeah, so we need to be, if it is used, to be careful about the use cases. And any thoughts so far from the audience? And by the way, don't wait for me to ask you folks. If you just want to get in, either just shout out or put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. But at this stage, is there a technology that any of you think we are at risk maybe of getting overexcited about? There could be blockchain, other things that we've spoken about today. Any thoughts? Or we'll move on. Okay, yes, we've got a lady at the front. If we can just bring a microphone over to this person. And as ever, just to help Mike out, because he can't see us probably, just tell us who you are.
I'm Anna Williams from Nesta. And I totally agree with the point about blockchain kind of maybe being overhyped. And our group couldn't get away from the fact of talking about how blockchain technology could be applied to centralized institutions, which completely goes against the whole idea of blockchain in the first place. So I think from that point of view, it's very difficult to get out of this cycle of seeing everything as centralized, and I don't know how we would move towards a society that would accept blockchain in that true decentralized respect.
Okay, yeah. So maybe a quick comment from you on that, Mike. Society's acceptability of kind of going decentralized, because I suppose, Mike, it goes against everything that most of us have ever known. There always has been a power structure. There's one here at this university. We have one in this country. It happens in sport. So it's a difficult thing, kind of paradigm shift in a way for people to get their heads around, isn't it?
Well, yes, in the case of money, definitely it's very new and it's a paradigm shift. I don't think it's quite so crazy, right? I mean, we use the internet, which is the sort of archetypal decentralized system, and it works okay, and it is difficult, and sometimes it goes wrong because there's no one in charge, and that leads to mistakes and so on, but overall it does work. Applying it to money is much harder because it's money, and the central thesis that the Bitcoin experiment is testing, right, the theory that it's trying to explore is money really so important that the costs of a decentralized system are justified? And the working theory of people who work on Bitcoin is that yes, you see monetary systems going wrong quite frequently, especially in places like Latin America and so on, where currencies are often very mismanaged. And maybe actually we do need a decentralized system for money. But that doesn't imply that we need one for everything.
Right, okay, yeah, so not decentralization for the sake of decentralization.
Exactly.
So, sure. Mike Short, if we can turn back to you, and a mild subject change here, but you're the connectivity guy in the room in many ways, working with Telefonica, and I guess before we can get overexcited about any technology, we need connectivity these days, and as you hinted in the introduction, it remains a challenge, even 4G, 5G and so on, isn't it?
I think we also need trust, and one of the things that comes with mobile operators is we're licensed by a regulator, and that's to help inspire trust as well as competition. When it comes to coverage, we clearly can only install where there is demand, or we have sufficient investment in spectrum that meets the demand. Today, we don't really have the coverage we would like to offer to our customers, sometimes because of the planning rules. I would like to make a mobile phone call, but I don't want a mast in my back garden, sometimes is the debate. It's a bit like the old days of, I'd like to drive a car, but I don't want a road in front of my house. So the planning rules come into this. So we're not in this on our own. I mean, our investment in the UK is over £600 million a year, and we invest globally around £1 billion a year in R&D and innovation. We're constantly looking at new ideas to actually improve coverage and capacity and capability and service. But sometimes it's a broader problem than just one operator can fix. I'd finally like to say that we've submitted to the government some suggestions about how to change planning rules, and believe it or not, the Scots say we'd like a different regime to England.
So one element is planning in terms of where you can put antennae, and I suppose the other one is in terms of spectrum. And I mentioned in the introduction that I was in Indonesia recently, and I don't think anybody there really worries too much about planning in terms of putting aerials up around Jakarta. You can stick a tower up as much as you want, but their big problem, and I think it applies in many other countries, and quite possibly this one, is allocation of spectrum. And the big discussion there is reallocating that prime real estate UHF TV spectrum to mobile networks. And I think the argument from there would be, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this part of the world, Mike, is to what extent that's holding businesses back. Are we less productive? Are businesses less successful because networks like you just can't give us the coverage that you'd like to, but regulation stops you giving us?
Well, can I stress that we've got the best customer satisfaction figures in the UK at the moment before I go back to Indonesia. I think the world going to 2035, though, on a longer term basis, will have to look at what is the total pot available for communication spectrum, and that will include mobile and broadcast together. It would also then start to raise questions about how much spectrum should the military hold. It will also raise questions about how much spectrum is needed to control the planes over our head. So we have to look at it in terms of what are the different sectors and their demands, and take a longer term lens to it. In Indonesia, they do have planning rules, but some of the history in favour of broadcasting and military has actually not favoured some of the cellular operators in Indonesia. And I could give you other countries, if you like, where there's some interesting tensions in this area.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to name any now? Or?
Well, in the USA, there is a big debate about offering more spectrum from broadcasting through to cellular, because the cellular guys can pay more money than the broadcasters. Now, it's also true that cable TV is a different phenomenon in North America compared to broadcast TV over the air. So maybe there is less need in America for the spectrum the broadcasters hold. You go to other countries where perhaps it's more command and control, like China or Russia, and the way in which spectrum is allocated is done quite differently. It's led much more by government rather than necessarily by market demands, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, sure.
But there has to be a debate about this, whichever structure you have.
Does that need to be European-wide?
So because mobile is a scale business, as the internet is, actually we need a stronger European approach where we have better consistency. One of the best things that's come out of European R&D is GSM, or 2G mobile, and that was based on collaboration between all Europe for spectrum, launch dates and standards. Therefore, going forward, we're going to need similar approaches for Europe because of scale requirements. It helps to share the R&D, lower the unit cost to the customer, give better functionality. Whatever you think about roaming, give better functionality. But the world has gone from 8 million customers when I joined the industry in 1987 through to close to 8 billion today. That would not have occurred, frankly, without the original European coordination.
Okay, and yeah, go for it, Sam.
Just a quick question. So domestically, the challenges that you're talking about would have a significant impact on the economy and businesses. Globally, the lack of access that people have, particularly in less economically developed countries, to the internet, amazes me that 60% of the world, if not more actually, has no access to the internet. What we can do in that space to level, I think it may be one of the most dramatic things that we can do to begin to level the playing field and benefit less economically developed countries.
Google's like, it's Project Loon, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Mike thinks of this. So it's not a project I'm directly involved in at all, but for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's an experimental project we're doing at the moment, which is taking helium balloons into the high atmosphere and relaying signals to them down from a sort of main station in a city to a very simple station that would be attached to a house, essentially providing balloon-powered internet over a large area, which in the long term could be part of the solution, and potentially in the short term it might have applications such as disaster relief. When internet goes down, you could get a signal and allow logistical efforts to take place and rescue efforts to begin.
A setting like Vanuatu, for instance, after a cyclone, those kinds of things. Just a quick comment on that from you then. What would a mobile phone company think of that?
Well, originally we grew up with mobile cellular. We've adopted Wi-Fi as a complementary technology. We have in some cases adopted satellite technology also as a complement. Loon, I think, is good experimentation. I think we need more innovation in that space. Technically, it lends itself more for the coverage story than for the data rate story that people are going to need. And I say that quite simply because we've moved from voice to messaging to data to video. It's not so good at the data and the video for large audiences.
Okay.
The other end of the spectrum as well. So if you're talking about I'm sure you're talking about IoT today, connected devices. If there's going to be 30 billion connected devices in 2020 or whatever, you're going to need other like low-powered radio network type frequencies, and because Wi-Fi is too.
And before we come back in, Mike, I'm not sure if everybody heard your point. Did everyone hear that? I think Wendy's might have been off at the beginning of what she was saying, but I'm really glad that between them they moved the conversation to where I wanted it to go actually, which is thinking about connected devices. As we've gone from voice to data and now to video, and I think Wendy, to paraphrase your point, but you can put me right if I've got it wrong, is that it's a connectivity challenge in terms of 30 billion connected devices, I think.
That's what they're predicting. There'll be 30 billion connected devices by 2020 and 10 times the amount of data going through. But for the small connected devices on your wearables, on your body, wherever, your fridge, you're going to need low-powered frequency networks as well, because it's very power hungry to actually have everything connected to Wi-Fi. So I think as much as the big data hungry piece in your end, there's the little piece at the other end that also has to be tackled.
Okay,
yeah,
which I suppose brings us in, we're going to get a comment in a second. We'll get a microphone over to the BAE Systems guy who was speaking before. Hold that thought, sir, because I was thinking about wearables, because I know that you did an MA in, I think, 2007, 2008 in wearables. And many people in this room might be aware of the Gartner hype cycle, and it kind of plots where, where overexcitement tends to start and then trail off. And are wearables kind of on that hype cycle, and do they tend to be overhyped? This whole promise that our bodies, going to have these body area networks that will do these incredible things.
Well, I think the starting thing for me was when I did my MA in 2006, a lot of at that point. I was in San Francisco 2 weeks ago with an investor called Jeff Clavier. He was the first investor in Fitbit, which I don't know if you know, it floated 2 weeks ago. I think it floated at 3 billion, it's now worth 9 over the last 2 weeks. So that excitement's only going to be increasingly fueled because somebody's actually, market forces wise, made a lot of money through investing in that. And so a lot of money is going to get ploughed into this anyway. And I think the technology is getting there. There's still issues. I mean, in fact, you can go back to the female point in the market. We wear a lot of wearables. We're not, why am I not wearing a Nike Fuel Band? Because it does not look great with my outfit, quite frankly. And I think there's an element
and also Esther would say it was just a toy anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'll get better. But there's an element, when you want a wearable, you want it to be effective, you don't want to think about it too much, you want it to be either very invisible, or you want it to be actually something that suits you as a person and is customized enough. And I think we're away from that yet. And this is actually where I think, it's one of the reasons I like the collaboration between the RCA and Imperial to do School of Design Engineering. Design combined with great tech and data is going to become the key going forward. Because it's all about how it interfaces into human beings. And when we move on to, I think a gentleman was mentioning, enhanced human beings, I think even more so. So I think that's something which I'm glad the colleges around here are investing in now.
Yeah. And one of our Foresight speakers was making just that very point about the talent base here at Imperial with a big art college next door and in a big financial centre of London. So those three, kind of finance, design and engineering all coming together.
We should have a great opportunity, I think, as a sector in that.
So no excuse for anything other than great results from that. Okay, BAE Systems guy, tell us your thoughts.
Massimo.
Sorry, I forgot your name.
That's all right. BAE Systems. So I guess we've talked today about billions of interconnected devices, Internet of Things. We've talked about UAVs or drones or whatever we want to call them. And all of those things depend upon spectrum being available, they depend upon geographic coverage being there, they depend upon the bandwidth being there. I just wondered what your thoughts were about communications assurance. So assuring that the link's there, not just the geographic coverage, not just the bandwidth, but that you can absolutely depend upon it, given that some of the systems that we're seeing being developed, certainly in the commercial arena, could be safety critical, or at least critically dependent on some of those communications links. So I just wonder what your thoughts were.
I suppose it's a natural one for Mike here on the stage, but I'm just aware, Mike Hearn, that you're sitting there at the end of a Skype connection feeling as if we're ignoring you, and so not to wake you up too much.
It's very interesting discussion.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Mike, but just because I don't know how much of the audience questions you can hear, but just that point about safeguarding connectivity. Look, I know it's not a Bitcoin question, but you're a tech guy, you're into this kind of thing. Just on the off chance that you've got a comment, fire away, otherwise we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm sort of disappointed a little bit that the internet industry hasn't been able to tackle that better. I had a conversation with, did an interview with the BBC a few weeks ago from Switzerland, and to do that, it turns out the radio industry relies on ISDN, right, which is a technology from the 80s or 90s, and they still use it when they want to do an audio recording over long distance because it gives you a dedicated circuit, right? You don't get random drops in the middle because you ran out of bandwidth. And it seems like with all the technology we have, we should be able to give that level of assurance, but part of the problem with the internet being a decentralized system is it's very difficult to sort of drive these sort of features through because there's so many stakeholders who have their own priorities.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a net neutrality issue potentially there, I suppose.
Yeah, net neutrality is a really complicated issue because there are very legitimate reasons to want to do traffic prioritization and load management. And that's part of the reason why sometimes we get great Skype connections like today, and other times it doesn't work very well. And again, it's a bit pot luck, right? If you look at 4G telecoms, and Mike could talk more about this, the LTE specifications, a lot of the networks, they're still using GSM for voice, actually, because and LTE is used only for data. Because for voice call, you need that reliability, and the internet-based technologies just can't give it to you. That seems like a problem we should be able to solve, but it's almost a political problem rather than a technical problem.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So Mike, that connectivity issue seems to be a natural one for you. Either of you two can take it as well, Sam and Wendy. But what your thoughts first, though, Mike?
Well, I think it's also about choice, isn't it, really? And if we go back 20 years, we've got far more choice in the way we can communicate than ever before. We wouldn't be doing a Skype call like this, for example, 20 years ago. So the choice has increased. There are some things that haven't kept up, and I think some of the areas like security hasn't kept up, perhaps at the expense of choice. Maybe the cost reduction is far better than maybe the security improvements that you might be looking for. I think, though, assurance has different dimensions to different people. You might be thinking about it from the military point of view, and how can you be assured of coverage? Or you might be thinking about data rates, or you might be thinking about end-to-end security. So I think it's quite a complicated question you're raising, but has to be put against the lens of demand, which gives more choice, whether it's lower cost, more units, more devices, or whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose whether it's symmetric or asymmetric. So, you know, we better move the subject on, because there's loads of other things to talk about. But for instance, if it's the TV coverage of the 100 metres final in the Olympics or the FA Cup final, that link has to stay up, and you throw loads of redundancy at it, but of course it's only in one direction. So,
well, for the Olympics, it was literally like moving the whole city of York into the East End of London for 4 weeks and then pulling it down again.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're deciding to go for an objective like the Olympics with a given date, you sometimes have to move mountains to get there.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Whereas if it's everyday connectivity of our wearables, hoping that, you know, when our sensor determines that we have a certain heart rate and therefore we want to listen to a certain bit of music streamed, you know, from our Spotify service, then flaky connectivity is not a great outcome. So, which makes me kind of look at you, Wendy, because I had that question and you can respond to that, but also just again moving things on and coming back to this theme of overexcitedness. And I think we're all very aware that there's a lot of overexcitement, certainly in terms of investment in technology. The VCs pumping huge amounts of real estate in San Francisco has gone absolutely through the roof again, and a lot of talk, you know, huge valuations of acquisitions, and you can't help thinking that it is undoubtedly another bubble. But I wonder if you think this is necessarily going to burst, if this kind of overexcitement, this is actually justified this time.
Lots of ways of tackling that one. I mean, the conference I was in 2 weeks ago, they actually, every VC, there's 500 VC there, everybody who came on stage is a VC, and they did a quick temperature test just to check what everybody really thought. So between 1 and 10, are we up for a correction soon, and when? Most people are around an 8 at the moment, and I think most people were interpreting that as in the next 18 months, there's going to be a correction. I think the only thing they weren't sure about is what's going to kick it off, and it'll be some external factor. Financially, it won't just be because of tech itself. And you know, so the advice, so what that means practically is the advice they're giving all their companies at the moment is if you're raise as much as you can, so you can, you've got something in the back when the bad times come. The other problem this time is, what is different tonight? There are genuinely companies making a lot of revenues. I mean, the reason Fitbit's done so well, it makes money, it has real customers. The problem with the valuations that's going on is a lot of companies are not IPOing. So what's happening is very late stage, large, what would have been usually PE, are going in and putting in enormous rounds instead. And the problem with that is what you're getting is a cascading set of investment which isn't crystallizing. You know, fundamentally what it means is LPs are not making returns right now. And if this thing collapses, then that they will pull out their money. Effectively is what's going to happen, and that will slow it down for a period. Saying that, if I look in Europe and UK specifically, I know of at least 30 funds that have raised early stage funding, like 100 million in the last sort of 18 months. And that money will need to be deployed, and they've already raised it. So that means even if there is a correction, there will be money going into early stage companies. The problem will then be what metrics will they need to show to get the investment? I still think good companies will always raise money, and that's actually how it should be. So if I'm honest looking at it, I think a correction of some sort would be good for everybody. It's not good for founders either, because if you talk to a young founder now, the conversation is always about investment. It should really be about, well, what product are you doing? Have you got any customers? What difference are you making? When are you going to have a real business in place?
Make money. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But PE ratios do seem to be more favourable this time around than last time. But just before we move on from that, I just said we've got some amazing business nous in this room. It'd be a shame to waste it. So, hands up those people who think we are, or the technology industry is getting overexcited. In other words, if you think tech stocks are overvalued and we may be in for a rather painful correction, put your hand up if you think that's the case. Okay, a very firm hand up there, and a few half hands going up. So actually still only a minority of the room. I'm taking it the rest of you think either don't have a view or think that actually we're not overexcited, and they kind of agree more with Wendy's point of view. So just hands up those of you who actually think everything is in context. There may be a slight correction, these things happen in business, but overall we're in a pretty realistic place. This is not 2000 all over again. Hands up who agrees with that proposition. So, okay, quite a few abstainees. I didn't see what you were doing there over the Skype.
Can I disagree with both? I didn't put my hand up, actually.
Oh, okay, no worries, yeah. I have my back to the screen. Oh, but that's interesting. We're going to bring another panellist on us in a second, but just tell us why you didn't necessarily agree with either question. I was obviously asking the wrong question. So what's your thought, Mike?
I think probably most tech stocks are reasonably valued. That some of these companies are extremely profitable. But where, that doesn't mean, as was said, most of these companies aren't floating on the stock market, actually. They're being valued exclusively by private investors. And what you seem to be seeing is, I've talked to venture capital firms, and they actually have like billions of dollars from institutional investors who would have, in previous eras, invested in other sorts of assets, right, in bonds and so on. But because of the current monetary policy, they can't get any returns out of these more traditional asset classes, so they're all piling into venture capital because they think that's where they can make returns. So if there's going to be a correction, it wouldn't be like the dot-com bubble where it was, members of the public sold their stock, right, and the members of the public sort of like panicked and sold out, and that caused the bubble to burst. It would probably be to do with some kind of rise in interest rates or more traditional asset classes becoming more attractive again. And this is a problem restricted to non-floating companies, I think.
Yeah, okay. And it makes, we had a few abstainees in the room here. It may be that they hold your view as well, that it wasn't quite as either or as I made it sound in my question. So, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that might account for it. I don't know if we can bring Professor Yang back onto the stage if you're happy to return. I think you might need to bring your chair with you due to the unique way this debate is being funded. In fact, no, there we are. Chloe's going to bring a chair up. So just to reintroduce Professor Guang-Zhong Yang, so Director of the Hamlyn Centre for Robotic Surgery. He began the day with his keynote that we all remember him kind of really outlining these incredible technologies to assist surgeons, and especially to, I suppose, maintain effective surgery, even amongst colleagues who are, inevitably their performance trails off over time. He showed us that curve, that inevitable curve when, you're not quite at your best as you go into your later career, but nonetheless with the assistance of technology, that can keep people in surgery for longer. So you come at a time, Professor Yang, when we're thinking about, are we getting overexcited about technology? What about in your field then? Is there perhaps a bit of overexcitement over the use of kind of robotics and assistive technology in surgery?
To answer your question,
They probably faded it out by now. Give it another try.
Okay.
No? Okay.
I speak loudly.
He's got a big voice, this guy. Here we go. Right, he's on
So
air.
the answer to that is really yes and no.
Yeah.
There is certainly a hype that to some extent in terms of what the robot will bring, actually the promises. But if you look at the medical robotics as a field itself, what we have achieved in the last 15 years is to establish its utility in surgery. People accept it, the surgeons, the patients, they all accept it. But if you look at this, the perfusion of the technology is only privileged few can have access to that. In US, most of the robots are actually in private clinics. And in the UK, most of the robots actually is not bought by NHS core budget through other donations and so on. So how do we take the technology to the next level is really to put the constraints, number one, in terms of its safety, in terms of the efficacy, and we all know this as technologists. But the other one is really the accessibility. Accessibility has many meanings, cost, in terms of usage and all these things. So I think if we can take that route, then perhaps the future will be actually much more brighter. And Intuitive Surgical, for instance, is one of the major companies in terms of surgical robot. And if you look at the company's book, and they are, it's a very sound business, and they are putting away a couple of $100 million every year that, in terms of surplus, in addition, after taking out all the R&D costs and so on. So to answer your question, in short, is yes or no, I don't have an answer. But if we can diverge the technology in the right way, I think this will actually do us something that is really good for the patients, for the doctors, and also for the economy.
Yeah, so it's coming back to something we've discussed so much today, which really is the social factors. You know, the technology is there, but it may be in the wrong clinics, and it's more about the haves than the have-nots, and it's only turning up in private clinics. Because the other prong to this question is, if we are getting overexcited, well, what's different this time? And maybe another way of thinking about that is, are we at a phase in all these different technologies that is incremental, or is it transformational? So just seeing as you have the microphone at the moment, Professor Yang, and in terms of what you do, is this more incremental? Is it just that the haptics have become a little bit better, the processing is a little bit faster, or is something transformational going on in your field?
Well, in terms of if you look at the healthcare system as a whole, you know, today that we talked a lot about the wearables and also in terms of verification, the safety, security, and all the different issues. I think for us is really to take the technology to the next level. It's really thinking, you need to have a different radical thinking, really. So we all are familiar with what we so-called prevention, prediction, and also personalization. That is one thing, though. It's called the participation, participatory medicine. So involving the patient in the process itself. So I was hearing a lot of the debate talking about the wearable sensor. Are we generating too much data? And are we really invading the patient private space and all these things? But for robotics, in surgery in particular, is really to support early intervention, minimally invasive treatment. And that treatment, a lot of the surgery, if we can discover early, look at how the pathway in terms of system level and intervene early, a lot of the surgery actually, including cancer, become a minor operation. So the cost will go down. And then you need to look at the entire chain. If you do minimally invasive surgery, you want to send the patient home the next day. How do you make sure you can have a safe discharge? So the sensing technology we talk about early on today becomes very relevant. I think it's really exciting to see we are developing technology, but root deeply into policy, socioeconomics, and all these issues. So technology alone is not going to change our healthcare system or change many of the things we do here. And you need to bring all this together. And today I really feel excited because Tech Foresight address those issues. So a lot of discussion, which is great.
Good, excellent. That's why we're here. Okay, so now, Mr. Dickinson, then you see a lot of stuff at Google. I'd like to sit down and have a pint with you, and you can tell me lots of stuff that's probably kind of business sensitive and classified, all that stuff that's going on there. But what, if anything, are you seeing that's going on there that is transformational, that really is game changing? It's not just search getting a little bit better and the network's getting a bit faster. You know, where's the transformational for you?
One of the things that I got very excited about, actually, with Professor Yang, when you had your keynote this morning, was the final quote that you had from Bill Gates talking about, on one hand, the devices, but not being slaves to the device. It's what it ultimately, the purpose that it serves, and that function. And I think I and the business is getting more and more excited about how we can make the very most of technology, but by doing that, get it out of the way so that we can engage with the world. I think what we were doing with glass was a good indication of that sort of thing. That project is still very much going. Just on a sort of more recent story, I've been running a project with the National Trust, taking people who are passionate about the natural world and putting them together with people like me and engineers who are passionate about technology. And previously, those two things have been seen almost as in tension, impossible things to bring together. And a lot of folks from within the National Trust had a position that to help young people get away from computer games, re-engage with the natural world, you just needed to remove the devices because the devices were getting in the way. So what we have tried to do, the project with them, is to work out how we can use technology as a way to get young people even more excited about the natural world, so that it acts as a sort of stepping stone to get them out there doing that. And so one thing we've started playing around with is the Google Cardboard technology.
Virtual reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Virtual
reality
goggles,
headsets. So taking National Trust locations and creating those versions of those environments. So they would be walking around a National Trust property, and then they would see what that would be like at night, with foxes and bats flying around all over the place. And similarly, doing the same thing for different seasons. So you can get people excited about the natural world, then they can put the technology to one side and and enjoy a rich, more varied life.
Okay, yeah. And what about you, Mike Hearn? Because it would be a really stupid question for me to say, oh, do you think Bitcoin is just incremental or transformational? It can only be the latter, because we've never had a decentralized cryptocurrency before. And I suppose part of that is the different payment mechanisms, transactional mechanisms that arise from it. So I'd be very surprised if you disagreed. It has to be transformational. Just tell us why.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be working on it so much if I disagreed with that. If you look at it, it bears no resemblance to credit card networks or banking networks or anything. It's very different structurally and technically and philosophically. And the reasons for this are to try and make new things possible, right? So you can do things like very rapid micropayments with Bitcoin. You can do things like having flexible dispute mediation, right, where instead of relying on the bank to mediate any trade dispute, which is the way it works today, or having a dedicated escrow provider where you have to deposit your money with them, you can have someone resolve a trade dispute, but they never have access to the money. And you can do all kinds of interesting possibilities, and we're really at the beginning of exploring what they all are. One possibility that I've talked about in the past is you can have machines that actually hold their own balances, effectively, and they trade with humans as equals. So people buy services from robots, and robots buy services from machines, and they actually equal in the economy. And that's not a property of the technology per se, but that you need it to be decentralized to achieve that, because you can't do that with a bank, right? No bank is going to give a robot a bank account. Bank will say, well, you can open a bank account as a human being and then delegate it to a machine. But to have a machine itself legally own that money, it can't be done today. So there's all kinds of strange things that become possible, and that's, for me, that's the test of a transformational technology.
Yeah, it's just that completely different mindset, isn't it? There's a hand going up in the audience here. We've got a gentleman here. I don't know if we can get a microphone over to him. And we've got about another 5 minutes, so I'd love to get a few more comments from you. Been maybe a little bit quiet these last couple of hours, so this is your chance just to be noisy and get a few questions in. We've got this gentleman. Great, it's all happening now. It's always the way, right at the end. So if we can get a mic over to this guy, you stand by, and then we'll just go with you.
Hi, it's Julian Wright from BAE Systems. We do a lot of trends and trying to understand how things are changing in the world. And one key issue that's perhaps pertinent here is we see an increasing rate of technology adoption, probably driven by the internet and global media. How does the panel see this impacting technology investment and also helping to drive hype? Do you see those as being very closely related?
Sounds like one to Wendy to start with.
To some extent, both are true. Where there is money to be made, media will go with it, because wherever people put the most money, they want to talk about it, right? And it gets overinflated. But I just think we're not going to stop the unrelenting tide of technology shifting. I think that people have modelled a lot of this. It almost does track. The size of the semiconductor, the efficiency, the speed, That's not going to change. There are too many people working on that. We will get to quantum, nano, everything, right? So you can't stop that. And therefore the money will follow that. I think I said earlier, it will go into every sector. Nokia probably did not think Apple would hit them as hard as it did. I'm sure the taxi companies didn't, and all transport, which you probably should be worried about, thought that something like Uber would suddenly come in. It'll come in when you don't quite expect it. All the futurologists will sort of predict it, but it'll come not exactly, it'll be on either side of that in a couple of years that it'll actually hit. And I think that's why, as CTOs and CEOs of public companies, you've got to look at that, because if you don't innovate that, another startup will, anyway, at some point. I think the biggest issue for me is I don't think human beings can keep up with that. I mean, there's people are talking a lot. I've seen more than half the startups I've been pitched in the last couple of months have all talked about machine intelligence of some sort for their business. And at some point, it will be super machine intelligence. And at that point, how do we keep up with that? I mean, I would argue, if I look around today, a lot of the issues I even hear at school are mostly down to social media. Parents do not know how to help their children deal with the different interaction that goes on because of social media at a much younger age and had impact on them, mentally, societally, everything else. And we know human beings will adapt, but how? And so I think at this point we do need to bring in, policy and government as much as talk about academia or R&D and finance in that. I think that's going to be the big shift.
Yeah, okay. Let's take this comment from this gentleman here. And just tell us who you are as well, please. Sir.
Tata.
Oh, so sorry, start again, the mic wasn't.
Jambal from Tata. Just using the opportunity of having somebody from senior from Bitcoin and Google here. We talked a lot about robots and good robots and bad robots and the problems of regulation, especially in our group. What I wanted to ask them is, I understand the net today has probably 50% of their traffic coming from bots. And is there any visibility on what is a good bot and a bad bot? It's easy to think and legislate on something that's physical, but something that's running on the net. And this came to me from a startup in cybersecurity. And according to them, more than 50% of all web traffic is bots.
I used to work on a team at Google that handled abuse, and I actually developed a system called BotGuard, that was its name, which detected web bots and blocked them. So there's a lot of it out there. Your friend is not wrong.
Okay, yeah. And what about your perspective, Sam?
I don't think this is one for me as a non-engineer.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wouldn't have too much to offer on that one.
So BotGuard, so the system I built wasn't actually about detecting like good bots versus bad bots. It was about detecting programs pretending to be human, right? Because that's what you're actually interested in most of the time. And it worked very well, but it was very reliant on sort of obfuscation of what we were doing and detecting subtle differences in the way that things worked versus how we expected them to work when there was a human at the helm. So I don't know how relevant it is to talk about long-term, robots and things like that. It was a very specific solution for a very specific problem. But separating humans and robots is only going to become harder as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think that bot example is this is obviously a software example, but we can think of physical examples too. But you raised an amazing point. If bad things or good things are happening because of bots online, then where can the culpability lie? What would a regulator make of that? That's massive.
I wanted to ask Google this because I believe, so these guys told me that Google doesn't differentiate between bots and humans for web visits and
right. Okay, so you're saying that Google doesn't just distinguish between humans and bots for web rankings and so on. But well, I think on that, it is nearly glass of wine o'clock. We could go on, but this is, by the way, this will sound like it's the end of the day, because I'll say thank you to people, and then there'll be a round of applause, and everyone's going to think, well, I can go now. But that doesn't mean it's the end. This is what we call a soft landing, because there is some refreshment served out, and of course, we still have experts here, we still have you, most importantly, and there are demonstrations and bits of kit and really, really cool stuff going on. So before you do go and indulge in all that, I'd like to say thank you very much to Mike Hearn for joining us over there on Skype. I'm really great to have you on, Mike, and I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos, and I've learned a lot from you, so it's good to have a conversation with you as well.
A pleasure to join you guys.
Great, thanks, we appreciate it. And also to Wendy Tan White here on the panel, to Mike Short, Sam Dickinson, and Guang-Zhong Yang as well. We thank you all for your time and your insights. Most of all, thanks to all of you for taking part. So don't go home yet, but let's say most of all, thank you to yourselves for being here and making it a brilliant day. And then we're going to bring Simon on as well. So here we go.